In this video, I'm gonna have some tips on how to buy a lens. Hi guys, my name is Matti Sulanto. I'm a photographer and a Lumix ambassador from Helsinki, Finland. And I make a lot of videos on lenses because I like lenses. I don't use that many lenses actively in my photography, but I love lenses. It's always interesting to get a new lens or buy a new lens and try how it performs. And if I can borrow a new lens, it's always interesting to try it and see how it renders and how it performs. And a camera needs a lens. A lens is probably the most important part in any camera, because without a lens there is no picture. Even without the camera you can project the picture that the lens makes on a piece of paper or on a wall or wherever, but without a lens you can't make a picture even if you have a camera without a lens, that is. And some of you might think, well, there's a pinhole camera that doesn't have a lens. But even a pinhole lens is a real lens in my opinion, because the size and the quality of the pinhole makes a difference. You can't just put any kind of hole in front of your lens or in front of your sensor or film to make a picture. It has to be a certain kind of a hole and certain size and everything in order to make a proper picture. And one of the most common problems for amateur photographers seems to be the choice of lens or lenses. It seems to be really difficult to decide which lens to buy and what kind of a lens to buy and so on. And I don't blame people for that. There are so many lenses and so many choices to make. And if you have no experience with the lenses in general, and if you haven't tried certain type of lenses at all, it can be difficult to imagine what kind of pictures they would make. And I hope this video helps you at least a little bit on deciding what kind of a lens to buy. But before I get into those tips, please consider subscribing to my channel and also hit the bell icon down there so you'll get a notification every time I put out a new video. And now, those tips. Ask yourself why you need or want a new lens. What are you going to shoot on that lens and what you need it for? And as soon as you can figure out that, it's a lot easier to choose the right lens for that particular job or task. If you just want to buy a lens, but you don't know what you're gonna use the lens for, then buy any lens and see what happens. But in my opinion, it doesn't make any sense to buy a lens unless you know exactly what you're gonna be using it for. So ask yourself, why am I going to buy a new lens? What am I going to do with that lens? And then the whole problem becomes less of a problem, and it might actually be pretty easy to figure out what lens to buy. So if you, for example, are interested in macro photography, then a macro lens is a natural choice. And if you think you're going to be using it for street photography, then some kind of maybe a wide-angle lens, wide-angle prime might be the right choice. But for example, if you are contemplating between a wide-angle lens and a telephoto lens, you must first figure out which one you really need. Narrow down your options. Once you figured out what kind of a lens you need or want, try to narrow down the options, because there are more than one similar lenses, usually. For example, if you'd like to get a telephoto zoom lens, at least in the Lumix lineup, there are many of those. There are pro-grade lenses, consumer-grade lenses, expensive lenses, cheap lenses, or affordable lenses. And one of the limiting factors usually is the budget. how much money you can afford to spend on a lens. And once you have that kind of narrowed down, then you can see what options you have for that kind of money. And based on my experience, there are no bad lenses these days. All modern lenses are good and capable of making acceptable or satisfactory pictures or photos if you just know how to use the lens. So even some of the more affordable options are usually really good, surprisingly good, I would say. Sometimes you can read comments on some of the social media groups that some lens is really soft. But if you buy a lens and it is really soft, then you have to take it back and get it replaced. Because I would say that there are no really soft lenses these days. It's a faulty lens or something is wrong if the pictures are not sharp. My message here is that don't be afraid to buy one of the more affordable lenses. Because especially if you have never used that lens type, for example a telephoto zoom lens, maybe it's a good decision to first buy a more affordable lens and see if you like that lens type in the first place, and then if you like it and you find that you use it a lot, then buy a more expensive and a better lens. Make your own personal lens roadmap. Maybe that'll help you to organize your thoughts when you see it all on paper. I assume you already have your kit lens because that probably came with your camera. First you place that on the map and then you imagine what would be your next purchase. Maybe it's a fast standard prime lens. Then you put that on your lens map, and maybe the next purchase would be a telephoto zoom lens, and after that maybe a super wide angle. And once you got all those laid out, then try to kind of narrow down the options regarding each lens. What kind of fast standard prime options there are, and what kind of telephoto zoom options there are, and what kind of super wide options there are. And once you have all the lenses laid out on the map, you can also figure out the budget, what it takes to build the whole lens kit. Spend the most money on the lens that you're going to be using the most. This, of course, requires that you have enough experience that you know which lens you're going to be using the most. But it makes sense to spend more on the lens or the lenses that you are using more. For example, if that standard prime is going to be your most used lens, buy the best standard prime lens that you can afford. And then, for example, if a telephoto zoom lens is something that you occasionally need, but you are not going to use it much, then you can probably buy a more affordable telephoto zoom lens. It doesn't make much sense to buy really expensive lenses and keep them on a shelf or somewhere in your bag most of the time. But if you're interested in bird photography or wildlife photography, then buy the most expensive or the best telephoto lens that you can afford, and then maybe your other lens can be just the kit lens that came with the camera if you're not going to be doing much other type of photography at all, if that wildlife or bird photography is your passion. The bottom line is that you have to shoot a lot and get experience with different types of lenses, because no one else can really tell you which lenses you are going to need or which lenses you're going to like. If I and 10 other people recommend you to buy a lens, a good lens, there's still no guarantee that you're going to like the lens. And no one can tell you that a certain lens is a must for you. Only you can learn to know what lenses you need in your photography. And in order to learn that, you just have to shoot and get more experience in your photography. and then you will find what is important for your photography. And if you find this video helpful, please buy me a cup of coffee. There is a link down below. And here are 2 other videos on lenses that you may find useful. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again in the next one.